There are two messages that I would like for us to remember from today's reading. One as individuals and another as the blessed Holy Redeemer faith community. Last week we heard about Jesus and his power and authority to teach by casting out demons. This was the first healing in the synagogue at Capernaum. The Gospel of Mark highlights the actions and deeds of Jesus rather than his words. And we are given many examples of Jesus' compassion and power. This week we read about another healing when Jesus goes into Simon's house and heals Simon's mother-in-law from a fever. There's a line that captivates me. When Jesus approaches Simon's mother-in-law, the Gospel says, he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her. When I think about that, I'm fascinated by the physicalness of it all. Jesus could have just said a word, right? He's done that 1,000 times before. Or he could have snapped his fingers or clapped his hands. But instead he reached out and touched her and lifted her up. This is a good example for all of us to follow. To act as Jesus acted. We need to reach out to touch others and lift them up. Lifting up others, no matter what human frailty is present, no matter how distraught or depressed or lonely, is a sacred calling for us. There are so many people that are in need of a simple touch, a hug, a handshake, a light hand on the shoulder. Don't ever underestimate the power that you possess in your touch. Now, you might not be able to expel demons or cure cancer, but you never know what impact your extended hand might offer to someone. Now, a short public service announcement, especially in today's world, as a reminder about appropriate touch. There are limits, and there are unwanted touches that have the power to cause more damage than we would like. We need to be aware of that and respect the boundaries of others. Just because we are comfortable or uncomfortable does not mean that other people feel the same. Some of you might be saying that is probably safer than to just keep your hands to yourself. And perhaps on some level that's right. But that's not what Jesus would do. The wider message in this story is about us as a community. Let us spend some time focusing on that as a church. After Jesus heals Simon's mother-in-law, it says, the whole city gathered around the door. The whole city. Can you picture that? The whole city was coming to this one little house in the hopes of healing. Mark likes to use the word city, but in all likelihood it was a village. But nonetheless, in the space of a few sentences and 2 healings, an unclean spirit and a fever, Jesus' notoriety is growing. This might be why Jesus keeps telling everybody to be quiet. Don't say anything, right? Don't let anybody know. Because he knows how the crowd reacts and how quickly the message spreads. In any event, the passage goes on to tell us that he cured many. Many. And then when it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. I can see Jesus really needing some time by himself. Perhaps to recharge his batteries by spending some time alone in reflection. He found a deserted place where no one would bother him. That sounds like something we would do, doesn't it? When we are overwhelmed with events, people, life, work, school, bills, health, etc., don't we wish we could find a deserted place to get away from it all? A place where we can take a deep breath, collect our thoughts, and pray to God about what is happening in our life and what we might need, like comfort or strength or guidance. In those times and places, aren't we looking for someone or something to lift us up? Just as Jesus lifted up Simon's mother. This church might be the place for you to find that oasis. Our story continues in verse 36, and it says, Simon and his companions hunted for him. Hunted. That word caught me by surprise as well. So I looked up several other translations, and other words that were used was search, followed, look for, inquest, tracked. And the more I reflected upon the word hunted, it gave me a more intense view of what might be happening in this story. Could it be the disciples were a bit frantic and desperate and not just worried? After all, it says when they found them, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." Thinking about being hunted, I can almost hear some annoyance in their voice. "Where the heck have you been, Jesus? We have been looking all over the place for you. We thought you may have left town." I would like for you to consider that perhaps the disciples and all the other people of the village wanted to keep Jesus there, to make sure that they kept this prize, this Messiah, the healer, all for themselves. When the disciples discovered Jesus gone, they sent out a search party to hunt him down. On some level, I do believe that they were probably worried, since he was creating such a stir. But could it be their intention or their hope was to stay put? To put something like a healing clinic in the town and let the people come to Jesus and not have to traipse all over the countryside. They could put a sign on the door and the word could spread, and people would come from miles around bringing the sick, the lame, the possessed, all to Simon's door to seek out the healing they need. If the house was surrounded by people in one day, when Jesus healed the mother-in-law, think what his ministry could have turned into over a week or a month or 3 years. But Jesus did not give in to that idea. Perhaps that is why he went to the garden to pray. Can you hear the conversation now? "Jesus, look at how the people are coming to you. The whole city is excited and in need of your touch. Let's stay here, and we can run our ministry from this place. We won't have to travel, we'll have a roof over our heads, and maybe we can even begin to accept small donations for the healings. It would be so much easier than traveling around the country." So Jesus could not sleep thinking about that and got up and went out to pray, to clear his head, ask for guidance. Could the disciples be onto something here? And when he comes back, he says, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I might proclaim the message there also. For that is what I came out to do." For that is what I came out to do. Not to be staid and happy with the status quo, but to go on and get out into the world. Jesus knew that he had to get out of that house, get out of that town, and take his show on the road. He knew that people who needed to be touched and lifted up were located everywhere that he would go through. And this is where our faith community of Holy Redeemer comes in. We have this great space and wonderful worship, and it's all very amazing and nourishing to us, but where is our ministry? Do we hope that the people who need us most will just magically show up at our door? Are we thinking that this is nice and cozy and that we don't have to go outside of these walls? We can put a sign up on the door and take a small collection. Some of us here today may believe just that. Perhaps we might be a little afraid of growth or change or sharing what we have with others. It just might ruin everything we have. After all, we have our Holy Redeemer community, and we feel special and loved and embraced. And if others come, it just might not be enough to go around. Mark is telling us that Jesus knew there might be temptations to that idea. And what we really need to do is the same thing that Jesus did. We need to go out and get out, so that we can proclaim the good news to the people, so that we can bring our healing faith and ministry to those who need it, so that we can touch others. And here's the good part, and be touched by them. We need their touch as much as we need to touch them. Are we ready for that, church? Do we believe in our calling to act and be like Jesus and serve the people of College Park? And there's no getting around this, that when you say church, I mean you and me. Are you ready to do what Jesus did to spread the good news to your family, your friends, your co-workers, and strangers? Are we up for that? Perhaps we all should take a moment and go to a deserted place to pray about it, and then roll our sleeves up and get busy. Let's start small. We have crafted an Easter letter that talks about Holy Redeemer MCC. You were supposed to take one with you today, but unfortunately it's not here. So they'll be available starting next week. And I ask that you take a letter with you next week, and for yourself, but also take an extra one to give out to someone, maybe even a complete stranger. You may notice someone who looks like they may need a place of hope, of rest, or of sanctuary. Nevertheless, we're called to go out of here, to reach the people of the world. There are folks that have been rejected by their churches, by their mosques, by their temples, who know that they can come here for a safe place and a sanctuary to worship God. There are people who were told that being GLBTQ is wrong and sinful and was a big lie, and that God made us, but God made us and loves us unconditionally just the way they are. There are people who have been hurt and neglected or alone, and they know that if they come here they can be welcomed and that we can celebrate the sanctity of all people. And there are people who have never known the joy and sacredness of coming together in worship and to be lifted up, embraced, fed, and nourished. My friends, we have good news to share here at Holy Redeemer, and the time is now. I encourage every one of you to follow the example of Jesus, to go out and get out. And a special notice about the meeting on February 24th, which is a Saturday. We'll come together, we'll play some games, we'll have some great food, and then we'll think about how we want to take those steps outside these doors. It's about spreading the good news. So be it, and may God bless you in bringing the holy word to life in your life and the life of others.